Hey, I'm Jesse, a graphic designer from LA, and in this video, I'm going to be breaking down 3 of my most popular pieces of design work. Final picks for these 2 personal projects and this client project that I did for David Bowie. Let's get into it. All right, so we're going to start with this first one, which was a personal project. This is just a poster that I made just for fun, posted it on Instagram, and it actually did really well. It was one of my better performing posts I've had in a while. And I feel like the main reason of that was because obviously the colors are super saturated and bright. It's a slightly edgy. It's a lyric people may or may not know, but regardless, they resonate with the message. And I think stuff, if you really want to optimize for Instagram or social media when it comes to design, you probably want something that's shareable and easy to understand. But that's not always the case. I'm not saying do all your design work for the sake of promoting it on social media, but sometimes you make something cool and it's shareable, and that's kind of a win-win. We started with a simple background, something gray like this, and I've been really getting into this just 50% gray standard color. And I think I first laid out the type right here. So we have our top type, The Devil Made Me Do It the First Time. These were lyrics from Waylon Jennings, his song called Black Rose. It was The Devil Made Me Do It the First Time. The second time, I did it on my own. I think the original lyrics were I'd done it on my own, but I kind of wanted to translate it into like a more easier to understand way of speaking. And if you can look in closely right here, you see these rough edges on the type. The original typeface is just ITC machine. It's like this very bold and rough kind of geometric sans serif. They used it, I think, in the movie Predator for the title. So I started with that, stretched it out a little bit taller, and then I added this rough distress effect. And to do that, I used this action called Distress Press. That's by True Grit Texture Supply. Just adds that rough little ink bleed. Then I added another a stroke to it just to make it even a little bit thicker. Next up, we added in these demons. So the reason I wanted to do something like this, obviously the devil, but I want it to be a little less on the nose than the typical ones you're used to seeing. And I really liked this brown color, so I did it with that. Where I got these images of these demons was actually from an old book, an old illustration from the Met Museum. You'll see too, I got this cross from there. There is this Met Museum. There's also the British Library. There's a few of these places that have a lot of cool stock imagery with both illustrations, sculpture, photography, whatever that's free to use. And especially something like this, it's not like I was doing it for a commercial project or anything. I wanted to match the style that came with the line art of these demons. And once I lined them up symmetrically, since we already kind of had a symmetrical layout, I had to add a little bit more angst by doing the upside down cross. And if you'll see, here's the source cross. It was this old scan or high res photo of this cross kind of made out of marble or whatever this is. And to get it to look similar to this style, I had to do a few different effects. So to start, if I put the fill back to 100 and take this mask off, I did this, right? This rough kind of just stamp effect. To do that, it was in here with the stamp in the filter gallery, adjusted the light and dark balance a little bit, and also added some grain. So you can see how that works. From there, what I did was add a stroke to it with this same kind of brown color. But I didn't like how this was looking, and I wanted the stroke to only be applied to the black areas. So I put the fill on 0, and I created a mask that only has the black areas. So even without the stroke, you can see what that looks like. So we only have the black areas that are shown through. And that kind of gave us the desired effect I was looking for. I thought this was really cool, and I think there's a lot you can do with this style of effect with different images, if you want to. Even that's kind of cool, that slanted composition. But if you drop in an image, give it that punk kind of stamp effect, and apply a stroke to it, I think that could be really cool. So for a few of the smaller details, I added in this left and right small type, and I did that same distress press effect right here to kind of roughen up the edges and give it a more printed feel. This is just saying lyrics from the song Black Rose by Waylon Jennings. Not absolutely necessary, but I'm kind of just a sucker for small type and having cool little things to kind of give it a little more texture and kind of fit that symmetrical vibe. The base font was Neue Haas Grotesque and Roman, -25 kerning. And it's probably more something like that, right? But I just stretched it a little bit to kind of give it that more condensed feel to make it feel a little bit more close to the composition. So that was our base design and layout. And I wanted to add some texture to the background. Here's our background texture. To do that, what I did was scale up that devil and give it a really big full bleed crop like this, just to kind of give it that cool texture. And I just made it a slightly lighter gray than what the background was, and I thought it was a really cool effect. And then the last thing I did, I believe, to wrap it all together was just throw in some texture. You can see right here when I toggle it on and off. Normally I would print my designs, but this hyper saturated red-orange color was so bright, I didn't think it would translate well to being printed and scanned. I think we'd lose a lot of the kind of eye bleed, almost like hyper saturation look I was going for. So I ended up just doing some digital textures to give it that desired feel. So you can see I use this texture right here from Black Market. It looks something like this, just a simple copy scan texture. And another paper texture like this. Pretty simple. And I had them on multiply, screen, varying opacity, and just mess with the levels like this to give it how much I wanted it to show through. That's pretty much it for that one. Similar process for the most part to a poster design I'd be doing just for fun. All right, let's move on to the next personal piece. And then for the third one, we'll dive into the client project with David Bowie. This one is my redesign of one of my favorite hardcore albums, Songs to Scream at the Sun by Have Heart. This is by no means an official project. It was part of a gigantic series I did where I redesigned a hardcore album for my favorite bands for every letter of the alphabet for roughly 26 weeks in a row. I already did a video out going over every single album art design I made. I'll link it in the description below. So for this one, Have Heart, people really seem to gravitate towards this one. It performed really well online, as well as I just got a lot of very nice comments from both fans of the band and designers I respect. This is the final print with full effects and everything version. You can see kind of the difference. Those finishing touches really make it stand out. So let's break it down. Our base layer is this image from Stills. Stills is this stock imagery site that I've worked with in the past that does really high quality stock images, and I used it for this project. This is not sponsored a video or anything, just mentioning that. Here's the original image. So it was landscape like that, and then I ended up cropping it something like this. And I really liked the hands. Songs to Scream at the Sun, it kind of had that vibe. It did not stray too far from the original album art. I really was a big fan of this one, and I wanted to kind of, I don't know, have a slight ode to it. That's interesting that it comes up right there. That's pretty cool when you search it. That was our base layer, and then we added in these slight stipple, kind of sparkling halftone effects. And how I did that was with Black Market's plugin called Ink Lab. And I'll show you the base layer first. So when you first do this, it creates a halftone of different layers for the CMYK channels, right? So for the most part, I just liked the little stippling up here on top. So I separated the different layers and then use this light blue effect on the final version. So you can see right here, that's all I wanted. So I masked out all this other shit. I didn't want all this heavy black or anything over. And to get the effect to be darker, I don't know if this is the best way for this, but I just duplicated it a bunch of times. You can see that's kind of the standard. And as you add more and more, it's just multiplying on top of each other and getting darker and darker. Once that was locked in, I just added the blue color and masked out the rest just with the soft brush. Look at that. That's the shit mask, but it doesn't really matter because you can't tell in the final design. And then we took that away and just overlaid it on top of our image, something like that. The next up was just adding a simple selective color adjustment to the image to kind of make it feel a little bit more contrasty and changing the colors. Here's how I adjusted the reds, the yellows a bit, the whites, and the blacks. And this can just pick out each color and adjust it. So see the white being manipulated right there, or with the red if you want it more magenta, more cyan, more yellow. It's pretty simple stuff. So this is our final strip lockup, and you can see I have an alternative version as well with this black stippled sun. I wanted to match the vibe of the stuff at the top, but I don't know, after looking at it for a while, I ended up just going with the plain orange because I thought it helped achieve the color better. How I made that though was similar to the effect I did on the photo up there, but instead of using that original image of that's in the background, I used, where is it? This picture of the sun. Did the same halftone effect to it, only kept that one layer of it and duplicated it. And I thought it came out cool, like a little bitmapped sun. That was not the final version though. So for the final version, yeah, we just used this orange, and then I did a nice typography lockup up here. This font is called Roslindale Display Extra Light, and I used that throughout the entire system right here, except for the small copy. We just went with Neue Haas Grotesque Light. And these are the different tracks. I wanted like a strip similar to the obi strips they do in Japan, but something that isn't around the edge. It's more lined up to a grid right here, and just nice negative space in the type spread out. You can see the grid I used right here. Nothing special. It's just columned like that. I created that with the guides, view, guides, new guide layout. That's how you can create grids with however many columns you want, rows, different margins, whatever. So that was that. I like having a lot of typography on my album art redesigns that I did, just because I feel like it's a fun way to flex some design skills and mess around. And then this final printed version, all I did was print out the image, scan it back in, and use the camera raw filter to adjust the colors back to how I wanted. And same with one of these selective color adjustments. And in addition to creating just these flat files, for each of the album art redesigns, I also did a vinyl disc and a vinyl like mock-up type thing. So for this one, super simple. I think I was getting kind of lazy, so I just did a similar image right here in the middle. For other ones, I did like typography or a different image or some kind of graphic. And then the mock-up, something like this. All I do was drop in my image, drop in my square, overlay it, and then I would just add a little cast shadow. Literally, look how dog shit that shadow drawing is. Like literally the most simple thing, and people would be like, where'd you get that mock-up? But it's really nothing special. And then to add the distressed edges and stuff, that's right, I'd have a vinyl texture version of the files where I used like an old record, and then I would just adjust the levels a little bit, put it on about 60% and have it on screen, and that gave me the effect I wanted. And those also were, I believe, from Black Market. Quick little deep dive for that one. Now let's move on to the poster project that I did for a client work with David Bowie and Decca Records. All right, so here's the final printed version for this design. What this was actually, just to give you a little bit more context, I work with Decca Records, which is an old record label, and they were doing for Record Store Day an exclusive box set release for Record Store Day of David Bowie's first singles, and they put them all into a pack. So here was the box set, different ones, Decca Records and DRAM. That was kind of their style. They wanted to promote it through print, through things like this Record Collector magazine. So there was the final. This was the final printed version with all the texture and in all its glory, and I'll show you how we got here. What we started with was a mood board. The mood board was really simple, and we used a lot of their archival work as reference. Decca Records and other record labels from the time, in the 60s, they used to do these print ads like this to promote the new singles, new records. Here's even one with David Bowie himself. You know, this kind of style, Elektra Records, The Who. Here's another one from Decca. This was kind of the mood board. I think they were a fan of my ability to replicate stuff from a specific time semi-accurately, you know? So I think they liked that, and they wanted to do something very texture driven, simple layout, clean, but kind of got the job done and made it feel like a period piece. So we started with these mood boards, right? And the assets that I was given were these 3 images. This one, and this one. I liked them all, and I experimented with, I think, all of them at one point in the original layout, but I just felt this one was the most dynamic, the one that spoke the most to the David Bowie at the time, and kind of alluded to the David Bowie he would become. This was like the seed of, you know, Ziggy Stardust and all that. So I went with this one because I thought it was the most visually interesting. And as you can see, here was the final layout, but how we started was something like this. The original layout, I had it a lot more red, square, and a lot more reminiscent of the examples that we were using, right? I really liked the image, so I printed it out and scanned it back in. For the type up here, we used Neue Kabel Black and this font called Davida, which is kind of on the nose considering it's David Bowie, but I really liked the combination of this thick kind of geometric serif font like Kabel and this more decorative one. And then there was a lot of text we had to fit in. So we had to fit in the logo for DRAM, the logo for Record Store Day, Decca Records, all this. So it was about finding a nice like column gridded out layout to make all this fit and work. You can see on the final version how it was all lined up, right? You know, the main headers with this was all set in Franklin Gothic condensed, and then down here was Neue Kabel Light. And we had to fit in all the songs from each disc, the label, everything. So it was good, and I think I ended up adjusting everything in a good way to where it fit and didn't feel too busy, but also felt like a nice composition. But it was a lot to mess with and a lot of type to kind of get through. And I think early on me would have been very intimidated by that, but nowadays I kind of like having a lot of type to work with. And I really liked the white text right here, and I liked how it looked with the logos, but we ended up having to adjust it later. So after we did this, we had some feedback, right? This was the initial design I sent. And then they said, well, we need to have a picture of this box set right here, right? And then after the first round, they said, well, we like it, but we want it to be a little bit different color, maybe more orange, more dark, something like this. And then also call to DRAM and Decca Records. And I noticed they had this, right? This thing. I really liked this thing. It was kind of Saul Bass-esque style and cool shape. So I recreated it in the background of David Bowie, and then also did a version that was just the rough outline. Pitched these two versions, adjust the colors a little bit, and they ended up really gravitating towards this one with the spiral background. And I think this is one of those cases where the client was right. I would have finished this square version and just went on with my day, but I actually really liked how it turned out with this spiral in the background. So I'm glad they gave me a little bit of pushback there. And for the final digital version as well, we also had to include this. This was my least favorite change for sure. I didn't want to have to include this little picture because it kind of messed up the composition, but I get it. It needed to be a Record Store Day exclusive, and we needed to show what we were selling, kinda. They didn't do that in the old days, but I think people now are a little bit more conservative and on the nose with their marketing. For the background textures, I also just did some copy scan and these old magazine scans like this that I scanned in from an old magazine I found just to give it that more realistic feel. And for the image, all I did was mask it out. Nothing too crazy, gave it a little contrast. And then this was the safe area we were working in. Normally I would have all this be a little bit more out to the margins, but considering we printed it in the actual magazine, I get why they were worried about stuff not going to the edge too much. For the final version, all I did was print it out to give it that nice noise and texture that I really enjoy. But caveat here, I printed this out for this digital version for them to share, for me to share, for social, whatever, because I like the texture and everything. But for the version I sent them, it was not printed out and scanned in because it was going to be printed and scanned in that book. And I think it's very weird when something printed and scanned gets reprinted. It kind of defeats the point of bringing the printed into the digital if you're bringing it back into print. So I always have a clean file, like this final digital version without texture, and then the scanned version that I like to use for digital applications. The original version, colors were really washed out. Look at that. But look how much we brought it back. So they were washed out. We had to add some camera raw filter. And what I did was I added the non-printed version on top and lowered the opacity a little bit, but had to line it up perfectly. So I gave it a little bit more high definition. Did some hue and saturation just to bring the colors slightly differently. Selective color adjustment to make the image of him more green, and just some curves and other stuff to really wrap together the entire system. I really liked how this final version turned out. This project was probably over a year ago now, but still probably one of the coolest opportunities I've ever done. I've worked with big brands. I've worked on brand deals with companies, this and that, but to work even semi-directly with a legendary artist like David Bowie, even on something small like a print ad like this, it was really cool. And I remember my past self would have been hella proud, like thinking there's no way I'll ever work with someone that I thought I'd only listen to in my headphones in college. So yeah, there's the breakdown for the David Bowie poster. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this format. I haven't done something like this in a while, but maybe I'll bring it back if you guys are messing with it. And feel free to let me know in the comments which designs you'd like me to break down in the future. That's it for now, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.